has wide-reaching implications for content creators. The companies, they're seeing their referral traffic just like plummet off a cliff, like between the AI summaries and just them Google driving referrals to their own platforms like YouTube. Like the inbound traffic is really diminished, and so a lot of companies now, like they're really having to reevaluate like their whole like information discovery strategy.
Welcome back to the Cloud Gambit, where we unravel the state of cloud computing, markets, strategy, emerging trends, and whatever else to the list. I'm William, and with me, as always, is Yvonne. How are you doing today, Yvonne? How's everything going in
I'm
Kentucky?
good. The sun's shining here today. It's warm outside, which is a nice change. It's taken till June for it to get warm and sunny, but it's a warm, sunny day, and so that's good.
Yeah, and you know what's great about it is it's not humid. So usually around this time of year, as soon as you hit June, the humidity about kills you. And right now, the humidity's low. It would be a great day to take a walk.
Yep, that is a bike ride is on my list as soon as we wrap this thing up this afternoon.
Awesome. So today we're diving into one of the most, I would say, fundamental aspects, really, of like the modern web search, but not just any search discussion. We're talking about how the entire landscape is kind of shifting beneath our feet, and what that means for developers, and businesses alike. And our guest today is Don MacKinnon, co-founder and CTO of Searchcraft. How are you doing today, Don?
I'm doing great. Great to meet you all. Um, I have to say, the reason I don't live in the South is just the humidity. So that's why I'm in Colorado.
It's very smart. Yeah, you have the dry, the sort of the dry climate, the carry around lip balm in your pocket climate, but we've got the scorching, if you walk outside, you're sweating in a minute climate. So I would gladly trade climates for sure. So I guess starting out, Don, let's start out with your story. Take us through your journey, who you are, and how did you end up co-founding a search company? What were the pivotal moments that led you here?
Sure. Let's see, how far back do I go? I would say, I call myself a builder. That's kind of like my background and strength. I've been working in tech professionally since '98. My first job was at a startup during the dot-com era. Back then, it was Perl and PHP and Tickle was what I was writing. So, but I kind of got my start on the tech side, working in media and publishing. So back then, in like the early 2000s, late '90s, media and publishing was like really big. Uh, those companies were huge, and they had like thousands of employees in like Manhattan and elsewhere, like huge offices, right? So I did about 12 years at a company called Time Inc., and they owned a bunch of brands people are familiar with, even if they're not familiar with that company, called like Time and Sports Illustrated, Fortune, people, those brands, right? So I actually started working for them, from a subsidiary that they had acquired in Boulder. There's like a winter sports subsidiary. They bought them, and at the time, I was one of the few people in Colorado that had a lot of experience with Tickle, which is a language you don't hear much about these days. But back then, the platform was called Story Server. Vignette Story Server ran much of the web back then. So they brought me in to be like, okay, well, we acquired this company. They're on Cold Fusion. We're going to migrate from Cold Fusion to Story Server, and we need someone who's good at Tickle. So they brought me in, and I kind of ran the dev team for those sites. So I did that for a bit, and then later, publishing industry, they like to kind of consolidate and sell each other their brands. So they sold off the ones that were here in Boulder. So I moved to New York, and I worked there for a bit on some other brands. And so that's kind of when my role within the organization shifted from just being a developer to being like an engineering manager. So I started running dev teams and getting more involved in like stakeholder conversations, working with product managers, and that whole thing. And I worked for that company for about 12 years. But then pretty much every year I worked there, they were doing layoffs. And then one year they were like, okay, well, we're gonna just cut your whole department. But it ended up being kind of like a political situation in that somebody else at the director level that was the same level as my boss wanted our group, but they didn't want to keep my boss, so they laid everyone off and then re-offered us all our jobs except for him the next day to come back. And so we're like, well, we're kind of loyal to our boss, so we all said no and went off. So that's when I left there, but that was kind of a motivator for me to not work at these big companies anymore. Like, you really have no control over your destiny. If you doesn't matter how hard you work, if you're just like a number on a budget, like, you could be cut, right? So I got into consulting at that time. That was in like 2013. So first there's like just freelance consulting back to publishing industry people. So not only back at Time, but also Condé Nast and other publishers in New York. So at that time, I went off on my own for a little bit, and then I joined a consulting agency that a guy I knew started. He was a PM that I had worked with previously. He's like, hey, we have these big projects coming up, and we really need someone who kind of knows everything about, like, how to stand up a tech stack and architect and all of that. So he brought me in, and I ran the engineering team for that consulting company. And we consulted for companies like Sony Music and Condé and Reuters and places like that, building out CMSs, doing like data migrations, and then later building out like a bunch of like Elasticsearch implementations. And so that's kind of where I got into learning about search and like what it takes to kind of, deal with relevancy issues and data indexing and cluster management, things like that. So I did that agency for a bit, and then I ended up joining another agency with my current co-founder, Searchcraft. His name's Sharpie. So he's more of a product and design oriented person, and I'm kind of like the engineering guy. And then we can kind of just combine forces, and we did the consulting thing for a bit. But then on the side, we were kind of building Searchcraft, and about a year ago, we decided, oh, hey, well, maybe we should like wind down the agency and try and do this product thing full time.
Sounds like a journey, quite the journey. That consulting work, grinding in the consulting space is really good experience because you come in, usually as a consultant, you come into what some might refer to as a hot mess or just a really complicated problem. And the point being that company may not have the engineering staff or the wherewithal to solve or migrate or do something, that requires very deep expertise. So when you come into those types of environments, you don't, and then everything's like, oh, we need it done as fast as possible. We need, we got to meet those deadlines. So yeah.
That was kind of our niche. Like, we got known for that at our agency is that like a lot of non-technical founders would bring us in because they have a product vision, but they didn't know what it meant to like scale it from zero and build an MVP. And they wanted somebody who had a reputation for like moving quickly and that could handle like everything. And even at some startups that we worked at where they had technical people, but they like couldn't move as fast as we could, right? So they would call us.
One of the things a lot of folks don't understand who've never been in consulting or worked in and around it is really the trick in consulting work is being able to learn and think on your feet. Oftentimes when you work for a consultant, you may have a core of experience, but very often you get thrown into a situation where you don't have the exact specific expertise that you need to solve the problem. It's more about being able to understand what's going on, pivot, and then learn what you need to do, or learn what you need to know quickly and being able to implement. Was that your experience as well? Like you were thrown into all kinds of situations where like, I've seen something kind of like this, but not this exact thing in the past.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they ask, "Can you do this?" And we always say yes. Of course we can, and then we figure it out along the way. Even if we didn't know how to do it beforehand, but we figure it out. So you just have to kind of be able to roll with like the unknown.
Very
Yeah,
much.
I love that. So I do want to dig really deep into Searchcraft and just the work that you all are doing and how things are pivoting. But just to kind of start things off and tee off the conversation, um, let's just go for it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. So we're in 2025, and the the search landscape is undergoing like a dramatic changes right now. Google search consumption is kind of on the decline. I've seen like reports of like something like 30% drops in click through rates. With this whole like AI overview and tools like all the GPTs, um, capturing more query volume, trending upwards. So from your perspective, is this kind of where the industry's headed? Like what are the new methods, I guess, for driving traffic to content, if that makes sense?
Sure. Yeah, it is a big problem. It has wide reaching implications for content creators. The companies they're seeing their referral traffic just like plummet off a cliff, like between the AI summaries and just them Google driving referrals to their own platforms like YouTube. Like the inbound traffic is really diminished. And so a lot of companies now, like they're really having to reevaluate like their whole like information discovery strategy. Like before they could get by, like, okay, well, like we don't need to make our search great. Like we'll just put this little magnifying glass up in the corner. Maybe people use it, maybe they don't. But it doesn't have to be great because people will find it on Google, right? But Google's not driving traffic to you anymore. So now they're having to really take a look at it and be like, the search thing, we haven't invested in it in a decade. Now we need to really think about like, is it is our content that we're making like discoverable by people who are coming with us to us with an intent to find something, right? Like companies like New York Times, I like to use them for example because they have excellent content and their search is like really bad. Like you can know the name of an article or know exactly what it's about. Sorry to call them out, but you search for it on their site and you can't find it. Like you can find it on Google, you can't find it on their site because they haven't put the investment forth to like really like build that experience up. And that's kind of where we've the industry going. We've talked to like a lot of people in specifically in like content publishing, some of the bigger brands, and they're all kind of having to figure this out now. And it is very much like a part of their strategy for like the next 12 to 18 months is like making either through like keyword search or AI search or like some of them haven't figured that piece out yet, but they all know they need to do something about it.
I mean, how long has it been since ChatGPT popped? I mean, it's not been that long, and the amount of change. I mean, I was talking to someone that got laid off. They worked on a marketing team, and that marketing team just got like completely just wiped out because a lot of the tool, like the whole marketing framework that they set up, it's like almost like no longer valid, and you know everything was the whole advertising, paid ads, Google search, all the different searches was kind of how they were driving top of funnel. And all that just kind of almost changed. I don't want to say overnight, but in the in the context of how technologists view things, like it was very quick. And there wasn't a
Yeah,
lot of time for preparation.
I totally agree with that. It moved much faster than people had anticipated. Like consumers have very much gotten used to going to Chat GPT and asking questions there now or another, AI answer versus like clicking through to a site now. It's like they're getting presented their information they look for right away. So why would they click through, right? But that means all of that effort into SEO optimization is like out the window. I think you're going to see a lot the marketing companies that do stick around. They're going to have to figure out like, okay, well, how do I optimize now for these LLMs that are scraping our content? Like maybe that's putting things into structuring content to more of like a question answer flow. Like that could be a solution, but no one's really figured it out yet.
Yes. So what just kind of the genesis of Searchcraft. So what were your specific motivations behind building it? Like was it purely, I guess what I want to get at, was it purely technical, like frustrations and such Or did you see like a market opportunity and just kind of jump on it? Like, okay, this is missing or it's not as saturated as it could be. We can do better. How did that come about?
I mean, there's a multitude of things. I mean, over time, at both agencies I worked at, we had kind of a deep understanding of how like the existing search platforms work. Solar, Elastic. We built those implementations out, Algolia. Um, but for anything except for like the SaaS hosted ones, if you want to run it yourself, you know, uh, it takes a lot of kind of back end expertise to do that. Like you have to know about clustering and sharding, and a lot of these are written in Java, so you have to learn about like, okay, well, I gotta be a Java guy and tune my JVM and things like that. Um, so we had been used to building things out with that, but like we're like, there's room for something better. Um, those systems, they are very powerful, but they do take a lot of effort. And since, as I mentioned, a lot of our customers were startups, right? Or things where we had to move quickly and get MVPs out, and they don't have time to like spend weeks or months or whatever on search implementations. Like they have features to ship. They don't want to be bogged down by that. So like, we're trying to move fast and take things off the shelf, but the off the shelf things that exist we're not good enough, right? Like, and for people who aren't trained specifically in search, um, there's a learning curve for them to use these tools, right? So like we're consultants. At the end of the day, a lot of times we roll off a project and have to hand it over, but then we kept seeing customers coming back. They're like, "Hey, can you add some synonyms to our index, or can you change the boost weighting on these fields or things like that?" And things that they couldn't do themselves, right? So we're like, well, maybe there's an opportunity here where we can just make that experience better for like developers, better for product people, so they don't have to come and call the consultants to come tune their index, right? So we we wanted to make something with a better experience, but at the same time, we're like, well, if we're gonna try and tackle this problem, let's reimagine it from like the ground up. And what that meant is like, well, if I were to write something new today, where would I start? What language would I start with? Like all of those things. Would I use an off the shelf library that exists? Probably not, because a lot of these products are built on actually on the same common library called Lucene. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's a search library that was developed in '99, I believe. It's had improvements over the years, but it's still like the core tech is fairly old at this time. And if you're building something, you're only going to kind of be as fast and as performant as that core library. So we immediately didn't want to use that. There's a lot of learnings that we got from Lucene, but we wanted to start with something fresh. So that's why we were like, well, let's, Rust is really taking off. Let's invest in that and see how it goes. And so we kind of built it on the side on like nights and weekends while we're doing our consulting work. And then about a year ago, it got to the point where like, okay, we feel like the core is like feature complete. And if we wanted to turn this now into an actual like customer facing product, we could. So like let's talk to some other development agencies similar to ours and see what they would think. And so we probably had like 50 to 100 phone calls with other dev shops. And we're like, okay, what are your pain points? Do you feel the same way that we do? Or are we like totally off base? And a lot of people were like, yeah, Elastic is terrible to work with. And I keep calling them out, but yeah, they are terrible to work with. It takes too long. Like we have those problems. And we think if you were to build something better, we would totally use it. And so like,
Yeah,
okay,
that's an interesting decision right there. I got to say, like if you think of every other, I can't remember off the top of my head. I feel like most search stuff is going to be C++, but I think Elasticsearch, it may be Java. Well, it is Java, yeah.
yeah, it's Java.
And just coming in and saying, okay, everything that could be a possible competitor is, basically using C++. But here we have Rust.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bold. It's adventurous. I like it. What like, is there any specific advantages, like, out of the gate that you notice with Rust that gives you a distinct advantage there? Like, beyond just being, like, newer and core and more optimized, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we totally could have built it like Java or C++, but, um, going back to, like, we wanted a new foundation. Um, I think, building on top of Lucene, like, that's what Solar and Elastic did, and we're like, "Okay, let's try something new." C++, right? You have a whole class of, like, memory issues you could run into, like null pointer exceptions. The burden of memory management is very much on the developer to know what they're doing with C++, which there are some great C++ developers out there. But that's like you have a danger of that being kind of like tribalized knowledge that maybe one or two devs on your team are really strong in the code base. But like if you expand the team, maintenance becomes more difficult, right? Um, there's also this like growing interest in memory safe languages. If you go back to like the Biden administration, they put up forth a mandate to like shift towards memory safe languages to kind of avoid these like whole class of errors that people are getting into. And Rust just gives you that safety, both thread and memory safety out of the box. The compiler for Rust is like very nice. It's really helpful with, when you're in the code and writing and like providing you kind of guidance of where to go. I found that to be a big differentiator. Their whole like system of pattern matching and like algebraic types, and those are really pleasurable to work with. And their inheritance model with traits is really well thought out. Like it's very well kind of designed and thought out language.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I think this has happened, but, Linus decided to, incorporate Rust into the Linux kernel, I'm pretty sure. Well, why not? C++.
Mhm.
He everything I don't know. I just think that that's interesting because, of course, he's why we have Linux essentially and, like, why Git exists. So he, probably has a good, um, opinion on, the solid things to incorporate. So, yeah, you kinda got me wanting to, take a peek at Rust and try, you know, do some learnings there.
Yeah, it's like they don't overload the standard library. So there's this whole package system with cargo and their crates, which are really nice. I would say, I did a lot of like development in other languages that have package managers, and I would say Rust is probably the most convenient to work with as far as like, dependency resolution and things like that. Um, so yeah, I would say definitely give it a try.
And I guess so not to, I guess, linger on programming languages, but, yeah, we shouldn't, definitely. But, Searchcraft has, there's this interesting dual nature, kinda like you alluded to. So you you're both an agency, providing, services, if you will, and you're also building a product that's, positioned as this, like, drop-in replacement for Elasticsearch. Uh, how so does I guess, one benefit that just pops out, on the top of my head is like, oh, the agency work and the learnings from the agency work are like kind of like a direct um, feedback loop or, a way to like inform your product development for the replacement that you're building. Would that be true?
Oh yeah, very much so. So my co-founder and I, we both come from that services background. And so, we've been the people that, non-technical founders would lean on. They're like, okay, well, I don't really have someone who can stand up this application. Can you guys help us? And so we wanted to carry that over, that mentality and that spirit when we founded Searchcraft. Like, and a lot of our competition, they don't do that. They're just like, we're a SaaS company. You either download it or you buy it, and then good luck, right? Like, you might be able to hire like a third party like consultant to help you, right? Maybe someone who's certified in like Elastic or whatever. But we're much more interested in having close relationships with our customers. So we can know like what are the problems you guys are specifically trying to solve, and like are there pain points that like we can take from and learn, and like maybe inform our product roadmap decisions based on like problems they're coming across, or maybe features that we're missing, things like that. So, yeah, all of our customers, we're like, when they kind of sign up and they get going and they start building, we're like, yeah, have conversations with us, talk to us on our Discord. And if you get stuck, like we can help you.
Gotcha. How do you balance? I mean, I know that being a startup and just being like young and lean, uh, there's just only so many bodies to go around. But how do you balance resources between like services and the product? Or is it to that
It's
point
hard,
yet?
yeah, and we're a small team, so I'm not so young anymore, but I do work a lot of hours.
Oh,
We
you have
just
coffee.
have a lot of coffee. Yeah, no, I mean, eventually, as we grow, we plan on kind of scaling the team up, but that the services part will always remain important to kind of like the core of who we are, um, and just like making sure that people don't get stuck.
Gotcha. And I did see, so you uh I actually went and checked out the repo, but you launched a container image. And I think I saw something to the effect of it's like 90% or so smaller than Elasticsearch, a container image. I just thought that was like, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, you can look at the
90% a
you can
solid number.
you can do the math. You can go look at Elasticsearch Docker container and look at ours, and you'll see. And most of ours is actually Debian. It's not the actual app that's taking up the space.
That's so funny because I actually just Dockerized an application recently, and yeah, I use Debian Slim, the most slimmed down version, and then build time install your all the packages. You have like your build time stuff you install that's consistent, and then you have some runtime things you do as well, like your entry point. And yeah, the hardest or the longest part about it is building that base image up and only getting installed on it what you need. That's where all the
Yeah, totally.
space and time comes from. Um, yeah, but that's awesome. Is that open? I didn't look at the licensing or anything. Does that take community contributions or
Uh,
like what is the stance on that?
it doesn't. We our core is not open source. All of our integrations are going to be, but our SDKs and our clients and all that, but the core is not. And part of the reason for that is like open source is very important to us. We didn't want to make a decision to open something up and then possibly pull that back later. And we had some concerns with, some of the larger cloud providers and kind of what happened with Elastic with their license. So we're like, well, let's like not open that door at this time. But we still want people to be able to use it and like not have to pay. So that's why we have it. Like, it's free to use. You can download it. We also have a free like our cloud hosted version, which we call Searchcraft Cloud. That's got a free tier as well. So like you have options as a developer. You can either, run it yourself and that's totally fine, or you can use our hosted option and like have a free tier. And that's fine too. So we really don't care like which way you go as long as you like try it out. Another reason why we didn't open it up is like search is a very like niche problem, and we were going to probably be the sole contributors to the repo anyway. So it just really didn't make sense for us at this time.
So from a product side, as you're thinking about Searchcraft, like what's your ideal use case? Or if somebody's thinking like, is this a good fit for me? Like what's kind of your, the ideal either problem you're solving for or situation in which Searchcraft's a perfect fit.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So unlike Elastic, we're not trying to solve everyone's problem. So Elastic is really good at a lot of different things. So like log search, content search, etc. We're not trying to do like log search specifically. So if you're looking for log search, you can hit me up. I can make some recommendations, but don't use Searchcraft for that. We are very focused on like content search. So like, human oriented, like natural language content. And we had the reason I say that is we optimize a lot of our features around that and making sure that you can turn on these features at like query time and still have very good performance for things like typo tolerance or fuzzy matching and whatnot. Whereas some of our competitors, if you want to turn on the full suite of features, you kind of have a trade off. We're like, okay, I'm gonna have a performance issue when I'm getting in the millions of documents now, right?
So very much the content providers, media, long form content, those kinds of arenas?
Yeah, like knowledge bases, documentation is great. Publishing content like news organizations. E-commerce is like another good one because of the way we have like our faceting built out. But yeah, not logs.
So, this is kind of one of the things I was really super excited. I mean, a lot of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is really relevant and exciting, but um, just kind of the current state of the market, like fundraising, for instance, like, I guess let's just talk about it. Every founder is dealing with it right now. Fundraising is hard. The data is, pretty stark. Like basically, unless you have AI prominently in your pitch, you have AI coming out of your palms and everything's AI. It is significantly harder to raise capital in 2025. Um, AI, and we're seeing, anybody that looks at the news for more than 5 minutes is seeing these AI companies raise it just massive valuations, where the math just doesn't even make sense, while non AI companies tend to struggle. Um, do you have any experience here? And if so, like what has been your experience with fundraising in this environment, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. You're very much right. Th- this is I've had startups before this one, but that those were bootstrapped. This one we did a fundraise. And yeah, there's very much that question that we get from the investors of like, what is your AI strategy? Like it's very much swallowed up not only all like the investment dollars, but also the conversations around tech in general. And some of our investors they took like a more nuanced approach and kind of understand that AI does not always need to be the hammer that drives the nail, right? But there's a good number of them that were really feeling the pressure to make sure their investments like have an AI angle to them, like from their partners or whatever, right? So it's a question that was not asked so much at the beginning of when we started our fundraise, but like now and later on in the process, it very much was. So like our core product, when we built it, did not rely on AI at all. But the landscape, as you say, has shifted since we built that core. So I think it's AI is a very transformative technology. It's fundamentally changing the landscape of business, and that has impacts on everyone's businesses. Our view on AI is that like we're applying it where it makes sense to kind of augment and improve the overall experience. So like AI is very good at applying transformations or analysis over an existing data set. So we're utilizing it to power like some of those types of features like trend analysis and like generative data enrichment. We're also doing natural language processing, semantic search via like through our SDKs. So that's going to be a layer where if customers want that kind of like transformative like summary response, they can use that and we'll have that feature available to them. But if they don't want it, they don't have to have it because some of our customers actually like don't want AI. Like they've said like we just want a smaller, faster elastic. We don't want an AI feature, and so like that's kind of why we don't ship that as part of our core, but we do have it available in both like our cloud dashboard and our SDK. So like people can pull it in and use it, or they can like opt out of it and not. But we're kind of a big believer of choice. So that's kind of like we're not going to force that on customers if they don't want it, but it is there if they do.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Really, I could be just totally wrong here, but just an observation. It seems like you have like the foundational model companies, like companies that are actually building AI, or they procure and produce the infrastructure that powers it. And then you have like, it's almost like everybody else is kind of like using it or either incorporating it with like existing features or making it as they go in and they pitch or they try to get funding. Like, yeah, we have this awesome thing, but we're using AI to enhance it like X, Y, and Z. Because let's face it, if you're building AI, there is a difference between those two things, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Because, yeah.
Like
So,
and these businesses are kind of just like they're gonna wrap some LLM or whatever. Like, what differentiates them from like the other people who are doing the same thing, right? I think a lot of those are gonna fall away after a while, after the hype kind of settles a bit.
Yeah. And I think that your response there is, I thought, pretty thoughtful, because it's like one of, I just, the media, YouTube, everywhere is so saturated with AI. Like, hey, you can vibe code this startup, and that's just not the case. And maybe one day it will be. And vibe coding is a real thing, but it's got its limits, of course.
Mhm.
You still have to be able to validate and know and like look at what you're doing, and you still need expertise. Yvonne and I were actually talking about that this morning, on kind of like the state of that in the market. But positioning like Searchcraft in relation to the AI wave, I think the kind of the way you pitched it wasn't disingenuous. It was, hey, this is what it is, and this is how it's getting used. So
Yeah, I
pretty
mean,
awesome.
as a tech company, you do have to be able to answer that question because people will ask you, like, okay, well, what about AI? Why should I use your product if you don't have AI? So,
To check a box,
yeah,
it's like
check the box.
the new security team.
Mhm.
Yeah. But yeah, also, like, just because you produce an MCP server doesn't mean that you're an AI company,
Yeah,
let's be
I
real.
mean, we're not in the model business. We don't want to be, and like, we actually don't prescribe a specific model for like our implementation. We let people they can bring their own if they want. I mean, we can like stand the full thing up for them, but if they want to bring their own because they're already paying for like Mistral or Claude or whatever, they can. So I think we still don't know yet who's gonna be like the winners and the losers on the model side, right?
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I guess, like, as we near the end of the hour, so what, just out of curiosity, what's your favorite developer tool outside of Search? Or what do you like working with?
Um. Oh wow. Let me think here. Uh.
I was actually asked this question the other day, and I froze. I was like, I don't know.
Does it have to be okay? Can it be like a thing you pay for, like a SaaS thing? Is that okay?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan of Plausible. I don't know if you guys have used Plausible at all.
Uh-uh.
So they're an analytics platform, but their whole thing is like not tracking people and like like very much anonymous, like analytic reporting. So we pretty much use them on all of our like marketing sites that we build because it's just kind of less shady than like the Google Analytics, and it also means you can get by not having to do those giant like consent banners that you have to do for like GDPR, which is really nice because I hate making those.
Yeah. Okay, next one. What's your biggest technical challenge looking back, that you've overcome in building the new product?
Okay, for me, it's like having to do a lot of the. I mean, I'm always building things I haven't had to build before. Um, so at the beginning, it was like learning about how do I build this core search library. But once we got past that, building up the whole tooling and infrastructure around making a software SaaS company, we have like internal like analytics tracking for like what people are searching on and things like that. And it needed to be scalable in a way where we could search across or like track analytics across like multiple search index clusters, but have it in a central like database. So we went with a product called ClickHouse. I don't know if you guys are familiar with ClickHouse, but the documentation is like not great. So figuring out how to like stand that up and scale that on our AWS cloud was like it took a while. And then we put it up, get it up in production, and we'd start getting traffic into it, and then like we would have issues. I'm like, and this thing like it gets used by companies like eBay and Netflix and these huge companies. So we know it can scale. We just don't know how to like tune it properly. So there was quite a bit of a learning curve with that.
Gotcha. And I guess my last lightning round question is if you could give, aspiring developers that are just kind of getting their, dipping their toes in the search arena, what would be one piece of advice that you would give to them about choosing search infrastructure?
Well, hopefully you don't have to become an expert in search, because if you're having to become an expert in search, then I didn't do my job well. So we want it to be an experience where people can just pull it off the shelf, get it up and running, and be on the way and build things that actually matter to their product, like building out their product features, not building search. So it really should not be something that people should have to deal with. Like, just kind of like authentication. Like, you don't want to be dealing with those types of problems. You need to deal with problems that make your product unique, and let kind of like the experts deal with those other issues, right? That's my advice anyway. Like, I wouldn't, if I was coming in, I wouldn't want to learn all they have to learn to build search, right? Like,
Yeah,
just do something off the shelf.
I can honestly say search and authentication, identity and access management are two areas where I just want to run
Mhm.
and hide.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've built out off systems, and like most people should not do that. They should absolutely not do that work.
totally agree. You got anything else, Savon, before we wrap up?
No, I'm all good. Love to know where to find Dawn online, and if people want to know more, where they can look.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Where can we find you?
so I am. If you go to, I'm on LinkedIn and Blue Sky primarily. I'm not really on Twitter anymore. But if you go to donmackinnon.dev, it has links to both Searchcraft and my LinkedIn and my GitHub and my Blue Sky.
Awesome. And I'll
Cool.
I'll definitely link all those, especially the GitHub. And yeah, everybody out there, check it out. And thank you so much for coming on. And we appreciate the time.